Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
Hi, I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Dennis-informed podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories in news, politics, sports, pop culture, and technology. And we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. Well, Micah, you want to give us a rundown of what we're going to be talking about today?
Yes, Connor, thank you for asking. So we're going to talk about immigration controversies today, the dismantling of the Department of Education, U.S.-Iran tensions, for example, what's a torpedo bat, and so much more. We're going to hit it all. So let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief. Yeah, we've got a jam-packed show. So honestly, right up top, let's just address two things that happened in the last, I'd say, 24 to 48 hours here.
Yeah.
First and foremost, did you see that Senator Cory Booker, who is a Democrat out of New Jersey, that man has some endurance.
Yeah.
He broke the speech record on the floor of the Senate. He stood up there and talked for 25 hours and 4 minutes on the Senate floor, which is a new record. I think it was like a 24 hours was the record. 24 hours, like 8 minutes, something like that was the record from 68 years ago. And he did all this. He was protesting Trump policies, and he drew attention to what he was protesting. So this might be something that the Democrats get invigorated about. This is something we've discussed. Who's somebody that can help lead the way for them? Anyways,
yeah,
Micah, how in the world did he stand up there for that long and talk?
Well, he told reporters that he hadn't eaten since Friday, and then he stopped drinking water on Sunday. So he said he intentionally dehydrated himself. So when he went up and started, he was dehydrated. So he had, he had evacuated himself. He had stopped eating. He evacuated himself. He had stopped eating and drinking anything. And he was like, I'm going to go up there. I want to read the transcript of everything that he said. Because I've seen this stuff before where they'll like read children's books or, have casual conversation. Just as long as they don't yield the floor, it's theirs. So as long as you can stand up there. So he didn't go to the bathroom. He didn't eat anything. He didn't drink anything for 25 hours and 4 minutes. You know what, man? That's putting your money where your mouth is. Good for you.
It is. This is also how I learned that he played tight end at Stanford. And so I guess he's just got some of that athletic.
He's an athlete
build in him. Yeah. So anyways, good job, Cory Booker. That's impressive. And then second, before we get into the full brief here is Micah, we lost an American icon. Val Kilmer died on Tuesday. Of course, known for Top Gun, playing Iceman, the movie Tombstone. He played Jim Morrison in the movie The Doors. He was in Heat, great movie. He played Batman in the 90s. He was really a big 90s star, late 80s, 90s star. He did some stuff here and there in the 2000s and 2010s, but he was diagnosed with throat cancer, a little over a decade ago, so he kind of dropped out of movies.
Yep.
Then he made a return in Top Gun Maverick with that just awesome tribute to his character and to him in general, where he was able to speak through the computer and all of that. So just sad to lose Val Kilmer, and we're praying for him, his family.
R.I.P., man. R.I.P. to the American legend, Val Kilmer.
Truly. Micah, let's talk about something that's been really hard. We got a listener who I'm not going to name, but they did reach out and they asked for some clarity on a current situation happening in America, and that is regarding immigration and deportations. They specifically cited that some of their coworkers are immigrants who are on visas, and they are extremely worried. Thank you to this listener for reaching out and sharing that, but also asking about this. This is something Mike and I have been talking about, discussing on the podcast. So this kind of just really got us to do a deep dive here. And so It is a complicated issue. And so we need to discuss it. And Americans need to decide, and Christians need to decide where they land on these different things. So let's just get some background here. In March of 2025, so last month, illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border, Micah, dropped dramatically by 94% compared to last March in 2024. There were only about 7,000 illegal crossings, whereas in March of 2024, there were 137,000. So this decline is, just an insane drop. This decline is attributed, of course, to stricter enforcement policies and increased consequences for unauthorized entry from the Trump administration. So Trump came in and he made it very clear he's going to crack down on this. And they have started doing that. They campaigned heavily on that. I think a lot of people are totally fine with cracking down on crossings at the border.
That is an issue. That's an issue in immigration. And then for the most part, deportation, when you kind of look at the statistics, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, that's a popular point for Trump. He has a lot of points that aren't so popular right now, but that's a popular one.
Yeah, this one is being seen as a win, a big success.
Yeah.
Like the people have known that they cannot come to the border and cross as easily anymore. So that is something that a lot of Americans are seeing. But Micah, do you know how many foreign-born immigrants live in the U.S.? Just a guess.
Like, yeah.
Okay, no worries.
I don't know. I have no idea. A lot.
No,
It's a lot.
I honestly, this shocked me. There are approximately 53.5 million foreign-born immigrants on U.S. soil living here. That's 15.8% of the total population, which is the highest percentage since 1890 when there was a big just boon of immigrants coming in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
And these are people on visas that aren't citizens yet?
On visa? No, this is just anybody who was not born in America that is now here.
Okay,
so it could be visas, green card. They could be a legal immigrant. They could be an illegal immigrant. Anybody that it's just...
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, you know what
that makes sense to me then. Okay.
Anybody born in a different country's soil. So, yeah, some of these are illegal. Some of them are legal, whatnot. The guesstimate right now is that of the illegal immigrant population of that 53.5 million, 12 million are illegal, not here in an authorized sense. So obviously, since Trump took office in January, we've seen a lot happen. Federal agents have made 113,000 arrests and carried out more than 100,000 deportations, with a focus mostly on removing those with a criminal history, violent history, anything that is known there. But all of this has many immigrants and activists on edge, as we discussed with our listener who wrote in, with the constant worry, that law enforcement may come knocking at any minute. The Trump administration has been very public about this. They've posted videos and images of them doing raids in big cities, on restaurants and neighborhoods and all of that, which of course puts you on edge if you are an immigrant or you've got a family member who is not here legally. This of course has brought just fears in regards to two things. One, that the government may accidentally or intentionally deport individuals who are actually here legally.
Right.
That could be a massive issue. And then two, splitting up families in these deportations, even when they are here illegally. So, you got families, you got kids maybe who were born in the U.S., they're American citizens. The parents are not. What does the government do there? Do they split the family? Do they deport the parents but keep the kids here? There's just a lot of worries there, of course. This all really came to a head in recent weeks when Trump's administration deported alleged Venezuelan MS-13, and I'm going to butcher the way you say this, but Tren de Aragua gang members to El Salvador. They've sent them off to El Salvador.
You absolutely butchered that.
My Spanish is so bad, so I am so sorry. I can't say some of these very
It's okay.
well.
It's okay.
El Salvador, they sent them to this notorious mega prison in shackles. They had their heads shaved. They filmed all of this in a high-quality video. It felt like almost like a movie scene where they just handed them off to these El Salvadorian special forces. Quite an intense thing that blew up because it went viral, the videos. A lot of people saw this. And honestly, a lot of people were like, okay, this is fine. You're sending off these gang members who are known for violent actions in their home countries, but also in America even. So that's not a big problem for a lot of people. But where this came to head is the White House ignored a federal judge's court order to turn around 2 plane loads of those alleged gang members as they were headed to El Salvador. And the White House did not have them turn around. And they said that they did not defy a court order. It just came too late because the planes were already over international waters.
Right.
Obviously, that's just controversial in a lot of ways.
He said, she said type of thing.
Yeah, and the judge was not happy. A lot of people on the left were not happy. A lot of people on the right were like, well, this is what happens. You got to get the order out in time. But there's a lot of behind the scenes drama to get those planes up as fast as they could so they could get them over international waters before a judge could make that order. And the judge, some are saying he overstepped his authority by issuing an order that blocked the president from deporting gang members under the, get this, Alien Enemies Act of 1789. So Trump used a law from the 1700s to deport these individuals. So that's just interesting. And that wartime law gives the executive extreme and immense power to deport non-citizens deemed to be a threat to the homeland without a judicial hearing, which is very crucial to this. Right. That just hasn't been used very much, and typically it's just used in wartime. So that's kind of why this is drawing an outcry from the left and from Congress members on the left who are warning Trump and warning us that Trump is entering dangerous territory and constitutional precedent by not abiding to the judge's order, by not granting those deported any sort of due process. What are your thoughts on all of that, Micah?
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like we follow a constitution that's that old. We follow a Bill of Rights and amendments that a lot of them date back to, before 1789. Yeah. But the context of it was so specific to like that war and that time and the war with the Brits and with other countries in Europe and stuff like that as America was a newer country. And so I mean, this whole thing, I mean, what you're about to get into is, I think, the thing that bothers me the most is, like, are we deporting people who are not here illegally?
Yeah.
I think that's what I kind of want to get into.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, in response to all these people on the left, did say, if the Democrats want to argue in favor of turning a plane full of rapists, murderers, and gangsters back to the United States, that's a fight we are more than happy to take. So she's recognizing that they've got the optic advantage here for sure. But reports have started to emerge of non-criminal individuals being deported alongside these violent offenders and being sent to these really brutal prisons, which is, of course, raised concerns about the due process. Did they get a judicial hearing? The answer right now is no. But did they deserve a judicial hearing? That's the question, right? And some high-profile cases that have gone pretty viral on social media have highlighted some of the potential errors in the deportation process, which, of course, have prompted calls for an increased, oversight and accountability. Let's hit on some of those. The first one is going to be Andre Jose Hernandez Romero, who is a gay makeup artist from Venezuela, and he was seeking asylum in the U.S. before he was taken into custody by ICE. This is because he was saying he was prosecuted and persecuted in Venezuela over his sexuality and was allegedly deported without any notice, according to his lawyers. And they also say he was lumped into this group of gang members on these planes over some tattoos that he has, with his lawyers saying that the mix-up allegedly happened because he has a crown tattoo on each arm with the words mom and dad. Supposedly, ICE agents and Border Patrol agents are told to look out for certain tattoos that identify members of gangs in Latin America. So that could be an issue. I'm not privy to all the information there. None of us really are. But this is where the case comes in. He was just picked up and deported. He did not get a hearing of any sort to prove any evidence. Another one, Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran national who resided in Maryland with his U.S. citizen wife and their disabled child. He came here in 2019 when a judge granted him protection from deportation due to credible fears of persecution if he did return to El Salvador. Despite that protection, he was detained by ICE on March 12th and deported to El Salvador, to that same prison with that group of alleged gang members. According to the Trump administration, they do believe there was a potential administrative or clerical error. However, officials argue that the U.S. courts lack jurisdiction to order his return, as he is no longer in U.S. custody.
And not a U.S. citizen. Yeah.
He's not a U.S. Yeah. So was he accidentally sent because of an administrative error? The White House is kind of pushed back on that. They said that they do still stand firm on the belief that Garcia was affiliated with MS-13, which is a gang, and they have intelligence indicating he was involved with human trafficking. That's what Caroline Leavitt said at the press briefing in the White House yesterday. So it depends on who you ask, right, in these situations.
Yeah, it's tough.
Is this person just an innocent person here under protection from the U.S. that got swept up in these big raids or whatnot and then deported to these horrible prisons? Or was there gang affiliations there? The thing is, we just don't know, because typically in a situation like this is where we say, well, we'll let the courts figure that out. We'll let a jury decide. We'll let a judge look at all the evidence and make a decision. But that's just not happening here. And of course, there was also the big one a couple weeks ago with Muhammad Khalil, the Columbia University graduate who was in the U.S. on it.
Mahmoud Khalil.
Mahmoud, sorry. I said that wrong. My bad. Thank you for correcting that. But he was here on a green card. He is here on a green card. Was arrested last month for his role in pro-Palestinian protests last spring, and he could potentially be deported. He's currently going through the court cases there, so he is potentially going to get a hearing, but it still is freaking people out, because why was he picked up for this? Does he not have free speech rights? Green card holders can live permanently in the United States, provided they do not commit any actions that would make you removable under immigration law, which is what the Trump administration is saying he did. He was loud and proud about pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, just feelings on the campus of Columbia last spring. And so we'll just see what happens there with him. All of those cases, though, Micah, they do cause worries. And I honestly think those worries are warranted for a lot of immigrants in the U.S. So how should we respond? Couple points here. 53% of the country so far approves of Trump's handling of immigration. More specifically, 58% approve of his administration's program to deport immigrants illegally in the U.S., according to a survey that came out from CBS this week. So, yeah, his policies are popular, which I honestly don't think is shocking. I think Americans were frustrated with the influx of immigrants illegally.
That was a big reason why he got elected. Yeah.
And people don't mind the hardline policies and the border security and sending the military down there and the executive orders that he's published. And Americans generally like the idea of deporting violent criminals. But this survey, this is interesting, clarified that as a general principle, it's not acceptable to most if some legal U.S. residents were to be mistakenly detained by immigration authorities.
Of course.
But half of the Republicans who responded said that it is acceptable to potentially grab somebody on accident and deport them. That's where this gets dicey, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, what I think about is personally, Connor, I think you feel the same way. You're allowed to disagree. If you're a listener, I'm all about enforcing the rule of law, whatever that might be. We have to enforce the rule of law in this country. I mean, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And so as we are tightening up the border, which illegal immigration was a huge issue and it was having rippling effects across this country, it wasn't a good thing. Now it's been shut down for the most part. But then you've got people who are being deported, and they're being deported. For the most part, it does seem like they are violent criminals. But at the same time, is it okay with you, with me, with all of us? Like, are we okay with, as a person, only I can answer this personally and you can answer this personally as you're praying and processing through this? Is it okay if, you know, you're deporting 100 people and 95 of them are violent criminals and 5 of them are here legally, and maybe they're being torn away from their families and their way of life and the life that they've created here? You know, I mean, I think about, on one hand, I'm okay with it. And then on the other hand, I'm not, because Jesus left the 99 for the one. And so I do believe that we should be compassionate. And so it's a difficult one that I do not have a perfect personal answer to right now as I'm processing through this topic.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think one thing we got to remember is there are laws set up to protect 2 things. 1, this country and security.
Yeah. Yes.
And 2, there are laws to protect immigrants.
Yes.
So we don't want either to be broken.
That's right.
And the government can easily break the laws set up to protect immigrants. And that's what some are saying they're doing. I don't know that that's fully the case. It depends on the evidence here, but that's where it just gets dicey. Yeah. I do think cheering on the deportation of people who are just trying to make the best possible lives for themselves and their families, I don't think that's necessarily Christ-like.
No, it's not.
Instead, we should see this as an opportunity to love and minister to immigrants. And Americans, you know, you can choose to see immigration as a blessing or a curse. But Christians should choose to see it as a blessing for 2 reasons. 1, we are just so blessed to live in a country that so much of the world longs to be in, right?
Right.
Undocumented immigrants have greater motivation to risk imprisonment or worse by coming here illegally to our country than they do to remain at home. They want to be here that badly that they would risk all of this. Many come here and work hard and contribute to making this country a better place, right? Not all of them. And that's where, and some of them are criminals and some of them are bad. That's the issue. But we just need to keep that in mind. And then we're also commissioned to make disciples of all nations. And the nations come here to us. I just told you 53 million people in America are from other countries, born in other countries. So keep that in mind. And will you pray today for our leaders to seek God's wisdom as they address this very complex issue? Will you pray for immigrants to hear and respond to the gospel? Will you pray for immigrants and their families that are anxious and fearful for what the future holds? And will you pray for law enforcement officers going into harm's way to protect this country and its citizens from violent people? So many different angles here, but so many things to pray for. And all we can do is pray, right? When we're not the ones in charge of the situation. But as you pray through this and make up your mind and discern what's right and wrong here, just lean into God, lean into Scripture, and find what you believe is true according to the Lord.
Great. Thank you for that, Connor. That's a great breakdown and a great understanding. Guys, I know that story took a little bit longer, but we've just been hearing a lot about people in our lives who have people in their lives who are worried about this and who are struggling with this and who work with people like this and who have friends who are on the edge of their seats right now. And so we just wanted to speak to that, speak how we're processing through it and what God's word has to say about it. Connor, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate that breakdown. Let's jump into another fun conversation. And let's talk about the dismantling of the Department of Education, which is, again, another one that's just not incredibly clear cut from my perspective. So we had a listener write in. We actually had a lot of DMs on Instagram, a lot of emails this past week. Thank you guys for stepping up and sending us some stuff. We're working to incorporate that every single week. So this listener specifically wrote in, "Hi guys, I've really enjoyed your podcast and so has my Christian millennial son." Well, that's great. "I would love to hear more about the dismantling of the Department of Education and the drawback of grants that were given during COVID," from Nancy. Well, thank you for that, Nancy. So let's talk about the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. Let's do an entire overview of what's happened and kind of where we're sitting right now. So in March 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order directing the dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education. And he was aiming to transfer educational authority back to states and local communities. This move aligns with a long-standing Republican view favoring reduced federal involvement in education and has sparked significant debate amongst policymakers, educators, and the public. So Trump campaigned on this, and this isn't a new idea. I mean, ever since the Department of Education was established in 1979, this has been an argument of what place does the federal government play in local schools, local public schools that already have heavy city, county, and state involvement, right? So what part is it do they have to play? So here's the background of the department. In 1979, the Department of Education was created to centralize and oversee federal education programs, manage student loans. So again, they were created to oversee federal education programs, manage student loans, and enforce civil rights laws in education settings. So its mission has been to promote student achievement and ensure equal access to education across the nation. That's just what you find when you go to their website and stuff like that. That's been their goal. So let's talk about the specific executive order that came down from Trump. So in early 25, following his reelection, Trump began drafting plans to dissolve the department. The executive order was signed in March last month and officially commenced the process. Key actions included these three things: shifting federal education programs back to state control, moving student loan management to the Small Business Administration, and transferring civil rights oversight to the Department of Justice. So just to clarify, all of the functions are being placed somewhere else, okay? You can argue it's not being placed in the right place, but it's being placed somewhere else. And again, before 1979, there was no Department of Education. So there was a time where all of these things were being overseen by the state governments or by other departments within the federal government. So here's the legal and political reactions to this. I know everybody has heard an opinion on this so far. The move prompted immediate legal challenges from civil rights groups, state officials arguing that dismantling the department would harm marginalized students and violate federal education statutes. I think that that's a fair argument too, right? So what's going to happen to those who are in poorer communities or people who don't, states that don't have a great structure in place for their education system? What's going to happen in those situations? Teachers unions and advocacy organizations warned that eliminating federal oversight would widen educational disparities, which we all know exist. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers and conservative think tanks really liked the decision and said it's a victory for states' rights and bureaucratic efficiency, meaning the federal government not having their hand in too many things or more than they should. And there's been and will be congressional hearings on this topic that are intensifying the debate, with testimonies highlighting potential disruptions in student loans and civil rights enforcement. While some states might successfully be able to take control of this, there's worry that some states will not be able to successfully take control of this. Sure. But since this is all kind of starting, the jury's out on how this is going to work out. We don't know exactly how this is going to work out yet. So, Connor, do you know, so let's talk about student performance since the department's inception. This is an important statistic that how we feel about it or not, I do feel it's important to bring this up. So, Connor, do you know some of the statistics that have come out about the decline of student testing and outcomes in the last 30, 40 years here in this country?
Yeah, that's something I definitely study all the time. I know these numbers right off the top of my head.
No. Dude, for a second I was like, oh, okay.
No, this is like when I asked you a minute ago about how many foreign-born immigrants are here.
I know, right.
Why did I ask you that? There's no way you would have known.
Okay, there you go. So despite the department's establishment in 1979, data indicates persistent challenges in educational achievement and outcome for students. Let's talk about it. Reading proficiency. The 2024 National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP, revealed that reading proficiency for eighth graders in the U.S. has fallen to its lowest level in 32 years, with over a third of students failing to exhibit basic reading skills. Over a third of eighth graders in this country are failing to exhibit basic reading skills. I know COVID attributes to that, but when you look at data over time, it's just kind of a steady decline overall. Okay. And obviously more of a decline whenever COVID hits, right? Which makes sense, the COVID part. Mathematics performance. In 2022, 9-year-olds scored 15 points higher in mathematics compared to 1973. However, there was a 7-point decline compared to 2020, indicating recent setbacks. and then international assessments. On the program for International Students Assessment, PISA, U.S. student performance has declined over time, with steeper drops in math scores and in reading. In math, scores declined by 10%, and then in reading, they fell by 2% per decade. So per decade, boom, 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 2% decline. So these trends suggest that despite the department's efforts, challenges in student achievements persist, prompting debates about the effectiveness of federal involvement in education. No matter how much emotion there is around this topic, Connor, we must look at the data and we must acknowledge that there is an issue here. Something needs to change. We just have to figure out what the best solution is. So I think the data can indicate, and just even personal experience can indicate that there's an issue with public education. There's so many hardworking teachers, administrators, God bless them for waking up every single day and doing what they do. I have several in my family, but there are some issues that need to be addressed outside of just, we have these great teachers, but there are issues outside of that need to be addressed as well. So just like with the immigration issue, we've got to look at the data and say, no matter what our emotions are telling us right now, no matter how this affects me or affects me emotionally, we got to do something, but we definitely need to have some recourse on what's the best way to accomplish it. What's the best way to fix it, right? It's kind of the way that I'm framing this conversation or thinking about this conversation. So here's the pros and cons. I'm just going to give you a couple of dismantling the Department of Education. A pro, increase local control, empowering states and local communities to tailor education policies to their specific needs. So the federal government tailoring something for the entire country when each state, each county, each region has different needs, has different things that they need to be focusing on. Another pro, financial efficiency, potential cost savings by reducing federal administrative expenses. Okay, here's some cons. You're risking inequality, potential widening of disparities in educational quality and resources across the state. So this does risk that when there's already an inequality that's happening. And then secondly, as I said, the Department of Education being dismantled, these roles it was taking are being transferred to different departments. Well, there's a fear that there's going to be a disruption in services, challenges in managing student loans and enforcing civil rights laws and protections without a centralized authority. Fair pros and cons, right, Connor? Is there anything that kind of hits you from those pros and cons or anything that you might agree or disagree with?
Yeah, I think it's true that every city, every county has different ways that they probably want to educate. Right. Different areas of the country focus on totally different things. If you are in rural Mississippi in a school, you don't probably need to learn all the exact same things as somebody in New York City does, right?
That's right.
It's just different. So the idea of having more localized governance, I guess, over these school districts and systems makes more sense to me. But I also, the cons are a good point to point out as well.
Yep. So the decision to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, it does represent a significant shift in federal education policy. Again, the Department of Education has been active and has had an active role since 1979. So it has potential far-reaching consequences for students, educators, and institutions nationwide. But proponents see it as a step towards greater efficiency and local control, and opponents fear it may lead to increased inequality and disruption in essential education services. So as the situation evolves, it remains a critical topic of national discourse, reflecting broader debates about the role of federal government in education. And I think right now what the Trump administration is doing is we're having debates about things that we've kind of accepted as normal for a long time. And it continues to come up, whether if it's immigration or education, or whatever it might be, we're having these debates now of what's the government's role in it. And I think that those are healthy discussions. We can disagree with just kind of the sledgehammer it seems like Trump and Musk and Doge takes to certain things, and we've talked about that before. But I do actually personally think that it's a good discussion for us to continue to have as a country of like, what is the government's role in things? What should we be spending money on? What should we be doing? I do think that that's a positive conversation. So
definitely is. I think so too.
Yeah. So let me give you kind of a spiritual application of this. If this is really what God is putting on my heart, and that's that, we pick these stories, but we also really try to give you guys how we're wrestling with God, or how we're talking to God, or how we're talking with each other when we're not on the mic and things like that. So the debate over dismantling the U.S. Department of Education is really about how we balance three things in my mind. There are other things to include, but these are the three that come to mind right now. How do we balance the biblical principles, which I'm about to give you scriptures for, of excellence, stewardship, and compassion? How can we be excellent in our approach to how we educate students? How can we be good stewards of taxpayer dollars and money? But how can we have compassion for kids who are growing up in difficult environments? Or, these kids aren't choosing their environments. They're not choosing to be born in the homes that they're born in, whether if it's good or bad. They're not choosing to live in the states or, cities that they're choosing to live in. So how can we have compassion for them too in this topic? All right, so as Christians, we're called to do things well. Colossians 3:23 says this: whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, which means education, whether handled federally or locally, should actually equip students to succeed. And at the same time, we need to be smart with resources. Proverbs 21:5 tells us, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty only comes to poverty. So making sure money is used wisely and not wasted in inefficiency. But wisdom isn't just about cutting costs, Connor. It's also about caring for people. With wisdom comes an understanding about caring for those who are least of these, who are marginalized, who are struggling, who don't live the same life that we do, who have different circumstances that we do. Wisdom tells us to care about them too, to think about them too. So Jesus made it clear in Proverbs 21:40 on how we treat those people. The least of these matters. And any changes to education policy has to consider the students who are most at risk about being left behind. So this moment in time with this topic, and I think with a lot of them, is an opportunity to ask this: how do we build something better? How do we create an education system that sets high standards, uses resources effectively, and ensures every child, no matter their background, has access to a great education? How do we do that? How do we balance all of those? I'm not saying it's easy, but it should be the goal. We should be pushing for solutions to do all three, not settling for false choices between either have to choose efficiency or I either have to choose equity. That's a false choice where you're saying I have to pick one over the other. This is where wisdom, discernment, and leadership comes in. Biblical wisdom, discernment, and leadership. If we get this right, it could be a step toward a system that truly works with excellence, integrity, and care for those who need it most.
Yeah, that's good stuff. There are a lot of issues with the education system that need fixing.
Yep.
It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. I don't know if the dismantling of this entire department is the first step towards that. We'll just have to see. But I love that you gave a shout out to our educators, our administrators, all the teachers out there. You guys
working
are
hard every day, sacrificing so much.
We all have teachers that impacted our lives deeply. And also, I just want to say, if you're just curious what this looks like in a urban area, in a very big city type of district, watch the show Abbott Elementary. It's a comedy, but it also hits on some of these exact issues we're talking about.
That's a good point, man.
Yeah, man. They really show like some of the struggles that schools with minimal resources go through, but how much teachers really care and how these kids need school. They need the community that it brings, the education that it brings, the opportunities that they get out of it. So thanks for taking us through that. That is a crucial topic. And thank you, Nancy, for sending in that
Yes,
suggestion.
thank you so much, Nancy. It's great.
Okay, speaking of Nancy, let's pop over into our mailbag. We got several other people that reached out to us with some fun things this week. So let's pop into the mailbag.
Yep.
Okay. Right off the bat, relating to last week's story around the Signal group chat, we said, hey, if you've got a story similar that we could share as an example, send it to us. And boy, did we get a fun one here.
Okay.
So this guy reached out to us and he mentioned that, and remember, this is the journalist was accidentally added to a group chat in Signal last week and it blew up, obviously.
Yep.
This listener said that he accidentally added a guy to his groomsmen group text with details where he was sending about his bachelor party, which was going to be a camping trip. So this listener accidentally added this guy. So this guy now thinks he's going to be a part of his bachelor group, his groomsmen, one of his groomsmen standing up beside him on the stage at his wedding. Brutal. The guy was super excited and felt honored to be one of his groomsmen and was eager to get all the supplies he needed for the camping trip. The listener had to reach out and inform this guy that he was not, in fact, going to be a groomsman or a part of his wedding.
That's a great story. God bless you. Thank you for sending that in.
Yeah,
and letting
we
us
appreciate
share.
the vulnerability.
Letting us share in. Oh man, that is a travesty on every level. Because it sounds like this person is close enough to this guy where he wasn't like, oh, this is so weird that I'd be invited to this. He got excited. Right. He had no reason to question it. So this is like a borderline guy. I mean, Connor and I, you're married, I'm married. We have wives that we got married to. Amen. Hallelujah. Mm-hmm. But we had groomsmen. And there's always people who don't make the cut. And so it sounds like this guy was kind of on the fringe. Oh, brother.
Brutal. Anyways,
Brutal,
yeah,
man.
I mean, that is bad. It's not as bad as adding a journalist to top secret information. So
No.
if you want to feel, if you're listening to this and we just told your story, if you want to feel better, just remember that.
Just think of Mike Waltz if you want to feel better. Yep.
Yeah. We had several people message us on Instagram. Go follow us at Culture Brief Podcast on Instagram. Shoot us a DM, drop a comment, or email us at culturebrief@dennisinform.org. But these Instagram DMs, we had one guy respond, Micah, to your hot take a few weeks ago where you
Jose.
said, Jose, he said he agrees with you. He mows his own grass. But he did not agree with me because I suggested you should change your own oil. He said, but I do not change my own oil because of the hassle of the disposal. You got to have a bucket and a pan. All true, Jose. I agree with that.
And if it leaks, it makes a mess.
It can make a mess. Yeah. And I have been very guilty of that. You got to go buy some cat litter to clean up. You pour that on the oil that you spill in your garage or driveway or whatnot. So he just avoids the headache. Thank you for letting us know that, Jose. Micah, you got a win there. I took an L. You had another person that says, yeah, I'll mow my lawn, but I'm not going to change my oil. Thank you. And then Josh reached out. This is interesting. This must be related to a conversation we had a couple weeks ago. He said Romo should have been paid more than Dak on the Dallas Cowboys. He gave us hope, and that is priceless. I don't know.
That's kind of deep.
I mean,
that's kind of deep.
Did Romo really give us that much hope? Did you ever think we were going to make a Super Bowl with Romo?
Romo has more of a flash in the pan. He was, he would always like run and gun. Dak can be accused of kind of, and, just for clarity, Tony Romo is the former quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Dak is the current quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. So, I would say Romo is kind of more of a flash in the pan, Hail Mary kind of guy, boomer bust kind of guy, would make incredible throws. And then at the same time, the next week would throw 4 interceptions, right? So, I would say Dak is a bit more consistent. Right. But the concept of like Romo being capable of carrying a team on his back if it's one game, I think I get that idea from Josh. But either way, neither of them have exhibited the ability to win in the playoffs. And that's really what matters.
Yeah. Either way, Romo's doing just fine.
Romo couldn't win in the playoffs. Dak, jury's still out, so far has not really been able to win in the playoffs.
Yeah, they're both, as of right now, just middle-of-the-line quarterbacks. We need somebody to take us to the Super Bowl. Thank you, Josh, for that.
That's a good thought, Josh.
And then we got an email in from Isabel who would love to discuss the upcoming season of the Netflix show Black Mirror once it releases in April. She sent this in because the trailer came out yesterday, 2 days ago maybe, of the new season of Black Mirror. Micah, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that trailer yet.
I haven't seen the trailer. I've seen a few episodes in the past. It's kind of a dark show, but it does sound like there's going to be some biblical perspective that we can bring to that if possible.
I have seen every episode of Black Mirror up to this point. I love that show.
Oh,
dude,
okay, there you go.
Black Mirror. I'm pumped for this season.
All right,
this
great,
new
man.
Season, the trailer showed a bunch of big stars are going to be featured in it. We got little.
That's true. They do have a ton of just random people they bring in.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Because each episode is a different story.
Yeah, they're basically like mini movies. So you can get somebody to come in and film this like 1 hour.
That is very interesting
episode. Yeah. Paul Giamatti, let's go. He's going to be in it.
I'm a big Paul Giamatti fan. That's my
Giamatti.
Italian brother, dude. That's my Italian brother. He plays a great John Adams, too.
Incredible John Adams. Also, The Big Fat Liar, 2003.
Big Fat Liar.
Turns blue. Anyways, Isabel, thank you for sending that in. We will be on the lookout for the new season. Yes. Okay, let's talk about things to tune into, Micah, real fast. U.S. and Iran, the tensions are heating up. This was something that was already heating up before Trump took office. It seems to be getting a little more weary. It's depending on if Iran refuses or accepts a nuclear deal with the U.S. Trump says that they've got 2 months to accept a nuclear deal and that they could face secondary tariffs if no deal is reached, and that the U.S. and Iranian officials are apparently talking. And the U.S. has not so secretively sent B-2 stealth bombers to Diego Garcia, which is an airbase on a small island in the Indian Ocean within range of being able to launch attacks stealthily on Iran, potentially on their nuclear research sites and launch sites. That's a very clear warning. If they wanted to keep those bombers under radar, they could, but they want Iran to know that they are within strike range. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's just kind of like a visual warning. Like you don't have to say, we're going to bomb you.
You send over these bombers that were all sitting in Missouri. They sent 6 of them, I think, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
6 stealth bombers overseas.
Yeah,
And
that's
they've
quite
also,
the show of force there.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also sent off, I think, 2 new groups of aircraft carrier strike groups over to the Middle East. So this is something they are making it clear, like they're putting the pressure on Iran.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so next we've got market and global responses to Trump's new tariffs and Liberation Day. So today, the day of recording, April 2nd, you guys will be hearing this. We release it 5 a.m. Central Time on Thursday, so this will be April 3rd. But today, when we're recording, we don't know yet, is Liberation Day, where Trump is supposed to slap at least reciprocal tariffs on every country that tariffs our products, right? So whatever their tariff is on our products, like, for example, it's like I was reading something that Great Britain or like the UK tariff something between like 14 and 18% on like all grape jelly products from the US, right? So things like that, Trump is saying, what you tariff us, we're going to tariff you. Oh, goodness. Obviously, the stock market has been not affected well by this at all.
Right.
Just the uncertainty of what Trump's end game is with this, like how far will he take tariffs? We don't know that. That's on purpose because obviously I am hoping personally this continues to be a tactic to just get some better agreements in place for U.S. imports and deports and stuff like that. I am personally hoping he doesn't take these tariffs all the way. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I just think it's funny that they're calling it Liberation Day. Like, what are we getting free of? Like,
and he's going to do this at Madison Square Garden.
Oh,
right. So he's going to.
Okay.
He's packing some sort of arena where he's going to announce this.
Okay.
Today.
Well, I guess we'll just
very
see.
Trump.
Yeah, I just when you hear Liberation Day, I think of like, when France was liberated from the Nazis, like not when we applied tariffs. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems a little dramatic, but we'll see what he does. Oh, yeah.
Speaking of Trump, there's been just teases from him and other people that he may seek a 3rd term. So we'll just keep an eye out on that. I would say don't take it too seriously. There's a lot of constitutional hurdles there, but I think he's just trying to drop it, drip drop, see what the response is from the media, from the American public. I just don't see that really happening. But if he starts to be more serious about it, we will dive into that for sure.
Let's keep in mind too, Connor, that he's been kind of hinting at this for a while, and he would be 82, close to 83 when 2028 rolls around. So we got to keep that in mind too. And Trump even said it's early in his administration, but obviously he is teasing and maybe being a little bit of a troll to say stuff like this because he's just trying to get a rise out of people and see what the reaction is. So we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people are saying that this was just his way of getting that out in the media sphere so that they'll stop talking about the Signal group chat leak from last week. And honestly, it's kind of working, I think. So,
yeah. Okay.
One other thing to keep an
fair strategy, maybe
eye out on, Micah, is the TikTok. We've talked about this a long time ago. The TikTok ban deadline is technically Saturday. Supposedly there's a deal in the works. They could easily push this deadline back again. We've already had a whole eulogy for TikTok back in January, and then it stayed alive. So I'm not even going to dive into this.
Arms of the angel.
Yeah. So
fly away. Anyway,
from here.
Yes. Well, guys, don't worry. I really do not think you're going to lose your TikTok.
I don't think so either. Not anymore. I thought so back in January, but not now.
No.
Okay.
No.
One big thing to watch out for, we got the March Madness Final Four. It is set, and they are playing this weekend. So this has been fun. I've got Duke winning the whole thing. They are still in it. This is the first time since 2008 that the Final Four is made up of all the number 1 seeds. So we got Florida versus Auburn. This is on Saturday at 6:09 p.m. Eastern. They'll be playing, and then at 8:49 Eastern p.m., Duke will play Houston.
What's so interesting about this March Madness tournament is that this is the first time in a really long time, I don't remember how many years, that all number 1 seeds made the Final Four.
Yeah.
So if you were to pick your bracket out based off of seeding, you're doing better, most likely, than the people who picked all these upsets. We did have some upsets in the round of 64 and then 32, and then it really kind of became clear-cut after that. And what's interesting for me, I have 3 brackets. One of the brackets I had Michigan winning. One of the brackets I have Duke winning. One of the brackets I have Houston winning. So only one bracket's going to look good for me right now because, unfortunately, Duke and Houston are meeting, in this set right now before the championship. They're meeting in the semifinals. So we'll see how it works out. Yeah. All right. Connor, let's talk about torpedo bats, man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about torpedo bats. If you don't know what a torpedo bat is, let me tell you. The New York Yankees made headlines this weekend by debuting a new torpedo barrel baseball bat. On Saturday, the Yankees hit 9 home runs. In their first 4 or 5 games, they've hit 17. It breaks a record. A single game franchise record for that one, and then a record in the MLB for the amount of home runs hit in your first 5 games. And it came just one short of tying the all-time record for homers in a game. The bats shift the thickest part of the barrel closer to each player's sweet spot. And then you can look it up. It looks very interesting. Kind of looks like a torpedo bat, literally. As determined by the team's analytics department, they hired this like brilliant physicist or something to come up with this and then lay this out. So each bat is custom made, and the MLB confirmed that they're allowed. And so we're hearing all these murmurs. We're seeing a lot of single players for different teams use them. A lot of teams are looking into just instituting this. And so I'd say, we have a buddy, Brady, he said, hey, I think every team's going to be using this bat by Easter.
Yeah, probably.
So, that's possible because it seems to be working for the Yankees.
This is very interesting. And I think it's just one of those things where you get the classic, like, jocks and nerds coming together to create a superpower. Like you got these engineers, this one guy designed this bat, gave it to these players, and they're just cooking the pitchers with them.
If the MLB is saying it's legal, I don't have a problem with it.
Either.
If anything, it's on all the 29 other teams, including my Rangers, to figure out how to institute it and use it.
Well, this is Micah, this reminds me of the tush push, right? That the Eagles do that no other team's been able to figure out, and they're debating right now if that should be banned or whatnot. But they've had a few years to do it. They've excelled at it. No other team can do it. If that's one thing,
competition, man.
That's competition.
That's competition.
You guys figured something out. Now the NFL might ban it, and the MLB, if they see these torpedo bats become a serious problem, they might ban torpedo bats. But
right. Like if you see home run numbers skyrocket to like a level we've never seen before, where like even the best pitchers, for some reason these bats are just the great equalizer, you might see a change after the season, but I think we're going to see a season full
absolutely
in Major League Baseball of these torpedo bats. Well, guys.
Oh, one last thing, Mike. I got to say this real fast.
Go ahead.
We're coming up on Masters Week. It all starts on Monday, but we will have a special segment next week about the Masters, because that is our favorite golf tournament.
Yes, we will. And I will share my personal experience of getting to go last year and seeing Scotty Scheffler win it all, and just talk about the majesty, the majesty and pageantry.
There you go.
Majesty and pageantry of the Masters, and how beautiful it is, and how wonderful and historical that tournament is in golf. So guys, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast. All articles, videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please please subscribe, rate, and review the show. And remember, we have an Instagram, so follow us, DM us at Culture Brief Podcast, and email us topics or anything that you want us to discuss, any questions, to culturebrief@denisonforum.org, and share it with a friend. Have a great week, and see you next Thursday.